There's a child sitting in a classroom right now. They're looking at a board. They are waiting for a bell. They have no idea that for 99% of human history, that classroom did not exist. That bell did not exist. That teacher standing at the front did not exist. And yet, for 300,000 years, every generation still managed to pass down to the next almost everything it knew. Language, skills. Which plants would kill you? How to track an animal across miles of open land. How to stay alive. So the real question is not when humans built schools, that is the easy question. The harder one is this. When did the first human decide that what they knew was worth handing to someone else? And the answer is not in a building. It is not on a written page. It is in a stone. The oldest stone tools humans ever made are more than 1.5 million years old. And the remarkable thing is not the tool itself. It is the refinement of that tool across generations. The Acheulean hand axe, found across Africa, Europe, and Asia, holds a design so consistent that it lasted for more than 1 million years. The same shape, the same method, from one generation to the next, in places thousands of miles apart. A consistency like that cannot happen on its own. Nobody reinvented that axe every time. Someone watched a person make one, then made one with their own hands, then showed the next person. And so it went for over 1 million years. That is what education looked like for most of the time humans have existed. Not a classroom, a demonstration, a child watching the hands of an adult, copying, failing, trying again, and being corrected not with words, but with a finger placed back in the right position, a strike redirected to the right angle. But how do we know this was really teaching and not just accidental imitation? That question sounds impossible to answer, until modern science rebuilt that exact moment in a laboratory. In 2015, the researcher Thomas Morgan and his colleagues published an experiment in the journal Nature Communications involving 184 people. They split them into groups, and all of them learned to knap stone the oldest way. Some groups were only shown the finished flakes. Some watched a person work in silence. And some were actually taught with gesture and with speech. The result was clear. When there was active teaching, the number of properly struck flakes shot up, and the quality was far higher too. Watching alone was not enough. To pass this skill on, someone had to genuinely teach it. And here's where it is worth pausing for a beat. The oldest education of our species was not a room and not a board. It was a hand adjusting the position of the fingers on another hand. That patience is older than writing by 1 million years. But tools are only half the story. The other half was carried by something that left no trace in stone. The voice. Around 300,000 years ago, when Homo sapiens, the wise human, your own species, first appeared, people lived in bands of 15 to 50. And in those bands, the elders were the library. You want to know which plant is safe to eat when a drought drags on? You go and ask the person who survived the last one. Knowledge was stored inside people. And when those people died, the knowledge died with them, unless it had already been passed on. And it was passed on above all through stories. The anthropologist Polly Wiessner of the University of Utah analyzed hundreds of hours of recordings from the Juwansi people of southern Africa, one of the oldest continuous cultures on Earth. She gathered that data across nearly 4 decades, and she found something strangely beautiful. During the day, while the sun was high, people talked about practical things. Who went where, who caught what, who argued with whom. But at night, by the fire, everything changed. 81% of the nighttime conversations were storytelling. Myths, ancestor tales, moral lessons wrapped inside a story. That was the original curriculum of our species. Not a room, a fire, not a teacher. A voice in the dark carrying information forward through time. And here's something not even the scientists can answer for certain. What was the very first story humans ever told each other around a fire? A warning about a predator? A tale about someone who had died? Nobody knows. Fire keeps no record of words. Maybe you have a guess of your own. And evolution tells us why children were built to receive all of it. A chimpanzee feeds itself within a few years of weaning. A human takes 18 years. Evolutionary biologists argue this is not a flaw. It is the design. The long human childhood exists as a dedicated window for learning. Every other species learns to survive fast. Humans learn to accumulate knowledge across generations. And because of that, humans built something no species ever built. Culture. Meaning that what one generation learns is not lost, but added to the inheritance of the next, growing thicker with every lifetime. And when accumulated knowledge grows large enough, it starts to leave traces you can touch today. Around 100,000 years ago, in Blombos Cave in South Africa, the archaeologist Christopher Henshilwood found something he published in the journal Science in 2011. A workshop. The people there took ochre, a red earth pigment, ground it into powder, mixed it with crushed bone, charcoal, stone chips, and liquid, and stored the mixture inside 2 abalone shells. The shells had been carefully pierced, This was no accident. This was the product of a multi-step process that had to be learned, practiced, and remembered across generations. The knowledge to make it had to come from somewhere. Someone passed it on. Then, around 36,000 years ago, in Chauvet Cave in France, someone painted horses, lions, and rhinoceroses onto the rock. And they did it with perspective, with depth, with an anatomical accuracy that stunned researchers when the cave was discovered in 1994. We cannot say for certain that a teacher guided a student's hand on that cave wall, but we can say one thing for certain. Whoever made those paintings had spent time developing that skill. Skills that sophisticated do not appear fully formed. They accumulate through practice, through observation, through being around people who already knew how. The knowledge existed in the community before it existed in any one person. That is education, even without a name for it. Then around 10,000 years ago, a change arrived that human memory could no longer hold. Agriculture changed everything. Humans stopped moving and started farming. Populations grew. Complexity grew with them. The farmer needed to understand soil and seasons. The trader needed to count and calculate. The ruler needed to record laws and debts. When the volume of information exceeded what memory could carry, humans invented writing. And writing changed education forever. For the first time, knowledge could exist outside a human being. It could be stored, copied, and outlive the very person who created it. The first formal school in recorded history appeared in ancient Mesopotamia, around 2,500 years before the Common Era. The Sumerians called it the edubba, which means the tablet house. When archaeologists excavated the city of Nippur in what is now Iraq, they found tens of thousands of clay tablets. Most of them were student exercises, the same sign copied over and over, calculations, vocabulary lists. At Nippur alone, there were more than 900 math problems. This was the homework of children who lived 4,500 years ago, preserved in clay that hardened when the buildings around it burned, and now it is worth pausing a second time. Among the tablets at Nippur is a poem called School Days, written about 4,000 years ago. It is told in the first person, about one bad day of one schoolboy. He arrives late and is punished. He talks out of turn and is beaten. He writes sloppily and is beaten. He stands up without permission and is beaten again. Until his father invites the teacher home, pours him wine, and hands him gifts. And suddenly the teacher changes his tune and praises the boy as a model student. That poem is the oldest description of school life humans have ever had. And it shows you a faintly funny truth. Students fearing their teacher and parents smoothing the way so their child gets treated well are not an invention of the 21st century. They are as old as the very first school. But these schools were not built out of curiosity. They were built for the machine. The Sumerian Empire needed scribes, specialists who could record trade, manage temples, and run the machinery of the first cities. Education had become a tool of the state. That shift from learning what you need to survive to learning what the system needs you to know is a shift we are still living inside today. Then ancient Greece changed the question entirely. In 399 before the Common Era, Socrates was executed for asking too many uncomfortable questions. He had spent his life in the streets of Athens using systematic questioning, forcing people to examine what they actually knew, against what they had simply assumed. He wrote nothing. His classroom was wherever two people were willing to argue. His student Plato, shaken by that execution, founded the Academy in Athens in 387 before the Common Era. A place to study philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, and ethics, not because they were useful to an administrator, but because they were essential to understanding reality. Aristotle arrived at 17, stayed 20 years, and later founded the Lyceum, where he systematized nearly every branch of knowledge that then existed. The very word academy comes from Plato's school. The idea that the goal of education is to develop minds, not just produce workers, was born in a garden outside Athens, among a small handful of people arguing in the shade of the trees. Then the universities followed. The University of Bologna, founded in 1088, is the oldest continuously operating university in the world. Then came the printing press, around 1440, which made books cheap enough for people who were neither kings nor monks. Ideas traveled faster than any teacher could walk. And then Prussia introduced compulsory state education in 1763. For the first time in history, education was something every child was required to receive, whether the family chose it or not. Now step back and look at the whole distance. A child in a hunter-gatherer band watching an elder skin an animal, copying every movement, learning without a single word spoken. A boy in Nippur pressing signs into clay at sunrise because the empire needs another scribe. Aristotle walking into Plato's academy with no idea that what he learns there will shape how humanity organizes knowledge for 2,000 years. A child in 19th century Prussia sitting in a public school for the first time in history, not because the family chose it, but because the state required it. 4 completely different worlds. 4 completely different ideas about what education is for: survival, administration, understanding, compliance, and every modern school system is a mixture of all 4. Here is the thing worth sitting with. For most of human history, education was not a building you went to. It was a relationship between someone who knew something and someone who needed to know it. The child watching the elder, the apprentice watching the craftsman, the young mind listening to Socrates in the marketplace. The institution came later. The relationship came first. We built classrooms so that education could scale, so that what gets passed down could be standardized. And in doing that, we solved one problem and created another. We can now teach billions, but most of them spend their entire childhood sitting in rooms, being told what to know, and waiting for a bell. For 300,000 years, children learned because they had to, because the knowledge was wired straight into staying alive. The child who did not learn which mushroom was poisonous did not get a bad grade. They got something far worse. The fire is still burning. We just moved it indoors, put it behind glass, and scheduled it to burn for 45 minutes every Tuesday morning. The child at the start of this story is still sitting there, still waiting for the bell. But now you know something they do not. The thing they are absently waiting through, your ancestors once ran toward the fire to seize. Because to them, what passed through that flame was not a grade. It was their own tomorrow.